so we were about 38 weeks gone. So so we were ready. So technically it was kind of any day.
Yeah.
Now.
So I went to I had an antenatal appointment at the doctor's, which was like seeing the midwife. So I went to see the midwife that afternoon. Got there, absolutely felt fine, felt amazing, nothing really to think about that would worry me. So as they do, she told me to lay on the bed just to check the baby's heartbeat, etc. So lays on the bed and she said, "Oh, not sure I can really hear anything," she said, "but it could be nothing." But she said, "Okay, get yourself ready and then just go home and it'll be fine." So I said, "Okay." Then I went home.
Yeah, came home. Went toilet.
Went toilet, yeah.
And then that was when you were like, "Oh, babe, I'm bleeding."
Yeah.
The doctor came in as, I suppose, the authority to check. Second opinion, that kind of stuff. And then he came and checked, and then that's when they went off to their little kind of whispering conversations to blah, blah, blah.
I'm just lying there.
And then, I can't remember, it was the doctor that actually came back and told us.
Yeah, came back and they said,
We said, "We can't find a heartbeat."
"I'm really sorry, we can't find a heartbeat." We were like, "Yeah, but can you just get them out, get the baby out and just see?" And they said, "No, we're really sorry. There's no heartbeat at all." It was the first time of me having a child naturally, because obviously I had Malachi by caesarean. And I think it was a case of like, wow, I've got to deliver this child naturally. I didn't really know, do you know what I mean, exactly how I was going to feel. And what they said was, when she's delivered, we'll just put her at the end of the bed. If you want to pick her up, you can. If you don't, you won't. Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of thing. We'd called the family by this point. We'd called the family and...
Yeah, because my mum at the time, she's not alive now, but at the time she was actually away and Dad called her. Just packed her bags and just come straight to
Yeah, everyone, because
Cleveland, come and
you could go to the hospital then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, so the family, Robert was there, Valerie was there, everyone, Alison came, there was people at the hospital. So Malachi was actually at the hospital in the end.
Because it was really different.
We had like people, remember Alison coming to hospital and she took pictures of her and like got them developed eventually, but then I would look at them, but then you couldn't look at them.
So we've got those pictures.
Still got them now.
Until this day, I haven't looked at them.
Yeah, Patrick's never looked at them. Whereas
and again, which is quite difficult for Phyllis, because I don't know why that is. Because if I could quite easily pick them up and pass them to Rosemary to do it, it's not like I don't want to. Yeah. There's just nothing that thinks, "Right, I'm ready to look now," or I don't know, that might change or that might. But that's never kind of, it's just never. I do remember on the funeral day, I still stayed by the graveside for at least another half an hour, totally on my own. At her graveside on my own. I think it was all those father moments in there. First day at school, getting old, getting married, getting the blah blah, etc, etc. I had all of that. I didn't, and that half an hour actually said nothing. But I just constantly, I remember I clearly spent the whole time in conversation with where she was in the ground, and just rolled all of that role play through my head. First day at school, growing up with her siblings. At the time, didn't know how many more we would have had. And I think I just played all of that in that half an hour. And I think and I remember I walked away and I didn't even look back. And I think for me, it wasn't a state of forgetting in the terms of that it never happened, but I just decided that we were going to live our life on from here. And so I was not going to ever be kind of trying to pinpoint stuff back to that moment. It was part of our growing story and would always, she is deeply cemented in there, so she exists in the story for the need for her siblings, etc, and all the rest of it. But I think for me that moment there was, this is a big moment of our lives that will be here I wouldn't write a book or anything without it. But I think for me, coming away from that, I also kind of felt responsible that actually it's my responsibility to make sure that we can live on from here. And I think in that's what that half an hour on my own encapsulated. The goodbye, the what ifs, or this is how I dreamt you would be. And then even that was hard, going back to work and Rosemary still being off, so it was just like every moment phoning home to check that she was alright. It was even sometimes coming home and eating dinner, and I just kind of I'm laughing now I suppose, but at the time it wasn't, but it was just like I just felt like I was constantly having to be like this because I was watching to see if she drifted off into thought, I didn't know if postnatal depression was going to come in, I didn't know how she felt about herself, didn't know if she was blaming herself, didn't know if she thought it was something like her. I mean, going back and talking about the explanation, there was no real kind of, there was mention of possibly tangling in the umbilical cord at some point, but there was nothing that really had defined that.
No, in the end they said it was a placental abruption. They said I had a placental abruption, but then the criteria for a placental abruption is normally someone that's alcoholic or got diabetes. So the things that would almost
be a dead cert
for a placental abruption, those were some of the criteria, and I didn't fit into those criteria, so I was like, it was like, really?
It was a bit guinea piggy.
God, really? Really?
Yeah, it was a bit guinea piggy for us, because they were kind of like, we just defied all the normal statistics. Perfectly healthy, perfectly well, not sick, there was no sickle cell, there was no, like you said, diabetes or anything. There was nothing to suggest any warrant of that.
All I kept asking, kept sort of saying to myself, saying to God, the reason why? What was the reason why? Really, what was the reason? Do you know what I mean? That was, and I remember writing a poem saying the reason why. And I remember Money Senior were really young then. They'd like written different things to us and saying, "I'm so sorry you lost your little girl." And her name was Hannah Leah Rose Medley.
I remember one person phoned up and they were like, "Oh, Pete, how are you, man?" I said, "Boy, really just coming to terms with it. Yeah, because I know it's not the same for you. I know it's Rosemary that really goes through it. So yeah, can I speak to Rosemary?" And I think only 2 people actually phoned, at any time that they phoned or spoke, actually felt they were concerned about my journey through it. It was just all about Rosemary and Hannah. And that was really interesting, because there was a point, I remember there was one day I was coming home from work and I just thought, I felt like I've carried this whole thing.
It was hard because I went into hospital with a belly. I went in, and it was emergency or whatever, but I've been pregnant for 9 months, or nearly 9 months. And then knowing that I've had this child, and then I was moved to a ward I was moved to a room on my own for for about a day. I didn't stay in hospital too long.
No, that was Thursday.
And then I stayed
Sunday.
Yeah, so I stayed in a room. I was literally in a room on my own, and then I remember my mum sending some flowers up, and they were a pink sort of bouquet of flowers, and I was like, and literally walking out of the hospital, literally with just my bag and those flowers, it's like, I just felt cheated. I just felt like, where's my child? Do you know what I mean? It was just like, this doesn't work out. That was just like so difficult. Nobody's fault, do you know what I mean? But for me, as an individual, I'm like,
well, emotionally, the pattern of your body's saying one thing, because there's the whole thing about breast milk, all of that pattern was all there. It was all there. So it was like,
I don't think many people really ask you again after maybe a year, 2 years possibly. There's only one person out of all of my friends that sends me a card every single year. and just thinking of you on that day. She's brilliant at sending cards anyway. So yeah, every year without
Big
fail,
props to you, Sue.
on that day she sends me a card saying thinking of you. That's all it is. Just think, and I know exactly what she means. And there's one other friend actually. She wasn't in my life before. I had Malachi at that time, but she knows of because her daughter went to school with Malachi, and that's Emma. She sends me a message now.
You know, and so in the relationship, don't be scared to ask the questions. Babe, how you feeling? You know, because sometimes the answer will be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool. But I know what that means, you know, or I know. And I think sometimes it gets difficult because it's the unknowing. And when we don't know, we can make other perceptions that don't need to be made or don't even exist. You know, baby, you alright? Yeah. Because I think sometimes if you're close enough, you kind of know when you need to prod. And when you push the first time and think, alright, that needs to be left alone. You know, and there's another time, you're right, babe? Sure. Do you know what I mean? And there's different ways to kind of apply that comfort to know, because there were times I'd be like, babe, you're alright? I don't want to talk about it. And then there were times I'd put the arm around her and it would still be kind of like, I don't want to talk about it. And then there'd be other times, are you alright, babe? I don't want to talk about it, but I'd put my arm around her and she'd sink in their arms. So the hug did the talking. Intimately, I was ready sooner. But I didn't know how to deal with that. I mean, all I do just come and just handle my wife. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and for me, that, as it should be, that's a very kind of dual moment. You both want to have to, so I didn't know how to approach that. I didn't know, you know.
Because at that point you're thinking, actually...
Well, I was now looking...
I don't want to know.
I was now looking at my wife desirably in that way. So I was thinking, oh, you know what, considering she's been through what she's been through, or how she's managing, I think I loved her even more because of how she was managing. So that was drawing me to want to be intimate. But it was like, the year after, the first year after, we did
a 1 year on concert.
We did a 1 year on concert, which was celebrating that. So we chose to opt the other way and celebrate it. Yeah. So we had made up in our minds very early on that we were never going to journey our lives together without Hannah in it. We made that decision very early on because it was such a big area in the whole journey.
Sorry to cut you, Malachi. Remember when he was about 4 or 5, he actually said to us, we had a baby, mummy, didn't we?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
I always remember him saying, I said, yes, we did, and then we explained to him what happened. I'm sure he was about 5.
Yeah, that was, and again, that was another reason why she's in part of our lives. So very often at the dinner time, she becomes the subject matter.
So how old has Anna been?
So it's that kind of thing.
Going through the grief of losing a child, stillborn child, I think you have to go with your gut feeling of how you're feeling within yourself. This is me personally. I had to go with how I felt. I had to deal with the fact that not knowing the reason why. That's me. That's how I felt. I had to deal with that, and also for me, I've had to speak about it a lot to help me through it. So I've spoken to people about it to help other people. So that didn't come straight away.
Roll with those punches and be you. There's something in you that has to be honest with yourself. I ain't coping with this, or I am, or today's a good day, or today's not. I mean, in any form of bereavement, that's really the counsel that I share. You have to take those moments, and I think roll with the punches and don't step away. I don't feel I can cope with that right now, so feel that is what I'm saying, rather than I can't feel that. Yeah, but I'm all right, you know, because you'll explode. And I think grief still requires you to be true to yourself.